Hey guys, Zed here, and today I'm going to be showing you a new tactic in War Thunder that I just found out about. I'm calling it the SH.U.T.T tactic, shrapnel under their tank. Basically, in this section right here, I'm using the M4A1, which has a total of 8mm of penetration on their HE shell, which isn't enough to penetrate the front of anywhere on this tank. However, if I fire under their tank, I penetrate and kill everything in their tank. As you can see, this tank has a total of 5mm of armor on the bottom side of their tank, and that's what it does. This is the next tank along the line of the test course. This is the Panzer IV-C. As you see, this one also has 5mm. It doesn't, as well as the last one, I can't penetrate it from the front with my HE ammo. However, firing under it can do that to the tank. However, that's about it. Past this tank, you face the Panther on the test run, and you can't actually penetrate that with only 8mm of penetration. You can fire also, through the side of the tank's tracks. Here's a slow-mo of what it looks like. And that's why this tactic is useful. This tactic is most useful, however, for tanks like the T-28, the one with the shrapnel shells. This doesn't work against Russian tanks, however, and I can't test it against them because of limitations. The shrapnel shell, however, is absolutely amazing with the T-28 and this tank. So as you can see, if you fail, however, you won't do as much. You have to make sure that you land your shell directly under the tank. And it will do this. It will normally kill the tank, and it will at least set it on fire. If you want to take out bigger tanks, however, like the Panther and the Tiger II, you're going to have a much bigger gun. The SH.U.T.T seems to be big enough to get under the Panther and all the rest of them, so 42mm is all you really need in the HE department. I couldn't find any shrapnel shells any bigger than the one directly before the SH.U.T.T, so that's about as good as you're going to get. However, it does work with all tanks. Things like the KV-2, however, will kill everything that it comes up against if you can just get your gun under their tank. As you can see, I have to back up here to get my gun to shoot under their tank. Some tanks this will be easier, some will be much harder. Anyway, right here is the first chance I got in-game to actually try it. This is a Russian tank, however. I can't do anything against this. However, I'm in the process of killing it. However, suddenly, right after I kill it, I end up spotting a Panzer II-C, which, however, I can kill with this tactic. I noticed my opportunity to record this tactic in-game, and I get ready. I start going. I end up taking a little bit of engine damage, so I start going a little slower. Knowing there are enemies behind me, I'm trying to hurry up. Because of that, now my engine compartment has been damaged again. I'm going much slower now. However, I have my HE shell loaded. I'm ready to come around the corner, and there he is, sitting right there. I aim, fire under their tank. Hit them, I damage just about everything in their tank. As soon as I reload, I fire, I hit them again. This time it finishes everyone off. All the crew are dead, everything's been damaged. I get just about the maximum amount of XP and credits I could get out of it. And this is why it doesn't, well, not why, but this is proof that it doesn't work on Russian tanks. I just shot under it and it completely failed to do anything. This next clip will be one where I was in my T-28. The next time I got it to work on multiple occasions. The T-28 shrapnel shell is a perfect representation of what you're supposed to use this tactic with and on. While that's just showing that it works, the next opportunity I get is against the actual opponent. However, the next opponent is a stug. The shrapnel effect, or the shrapnel shell of the T-28 is not quite good enough in penetration to penetrate the front side of a stug anywhere. I notice that I'm not going to penetrate them anywhere right after this next shot, so I decide, well, actually I don't take the next shot. And I do. Yeah, I do. But, I notice that I'm never going to penetrate them for the front, so it's time to put this tactic to work. The shrapnel shell for the T-28 seems to be the best shell to use in the entire tank line so far. Other than a KB-2, the shrapnel shell of this tank seems to work. I notice that I'm never going to get the gun depression to actually get past that thing and move around. I get it behind him. However, the tank to my right, and currently in front of me, has knocked out my gunner and taken out my engine. I am unable to take care of the stug, but he is too close for me to get anywhere. I go ahead and fire at him, and I take him out in the exact same way that I just showed. However, he's set on fire, and I decided not to take out him, for I would rather be able to take out the stug behind me that's causing problems. However, in the process of turning my turret, it ends up getting my last crew member killed anyway. And that's pretty much it. It ends up like that often. Basically, what you're supposed to do with this tactic is if you can't penetrate the front side of their armor, you're supposed to be able to fire under them with an HE shell or a shrapnel shell. You'll be able to penetrate the bottom side of their armor, send shrapnel flying up through the top of the tank, and through the bottom of the tank, and it will cause serious problems for them. It'll always set them on fire, and it will most of the time destroy them. However, as you saw in the first clip, it's not a guarantee. But, as you saw, it did damage everything. A simple shot was all it took from an HE shell to take out most of his crew, damage his fuel tanks, his ammo, everything. So he has some serious problems. And if he was a Panzer IV, he'd have the same problems, or a Panzer III, or a Stub, or really anything. But I can't test it fully with every tank and with every ammunition from each tank and against what tanks with what tanks, because I don't really have any friends to test them up against. And the test drive on the game is not quite good enough yet to where I can customize what I'm testing it up against. So I can't do much about that. However, it does mean that I only have to let someone else try it, and they can test it out. So currently, this is as far as I've tested. I can't get it to work on Russian tanks without some really big guns. It seems like the Panzer IV C or E, whichever one, has a nice 14 millimeters of penetration on their main HE shell. However, the T-26, first Russian reserve tank, doesn't actually use this, and even though it only has 6 millimeters of armor on the bottom of it, it seems to still have problems being killed or even penetrated from using this tactic. Let's see. It cannot penetrate the bottom side of the T-34. The T-34 has a total of, what was it? It's something like 15 millimeters of armor, or something along those lines. However, the T-34 is really close to the ground, which is something that the T-26 isn't. I believe that's the reason why I couldn't get it to kill the T-26. I believe that the higher the tank is off the ground where your shell hits, I believe the more likely you are to not penetrate as the shrapnel loses its penetration by millimeters per half meter, I believe. However, I can't test it out enough to confirm anything. Everything past this point has been speculatory. Let's see. The next thing would be that anything to do with the KV-2, it should penetrate and murder everything that it shoots under the tank of. It has 75 millimeters of penetration on its high explosive shells, and it will penetrate the bottom side of every tank that I could test it up against. However, the problem is that the KV-2 doesn't have a whole lot of gun depression, so you have to be at least 40 meters, mostly 45 or 50 meters, away from your target to be able to fire under his tank, which can be problematic. I've also found that you don't find yourself being able to use this tactic on any kind of range. You have to be close enough to aim under their tank with your high explosive shell. So, within 150 meters at least. And that's pushing it. You would want to be within 100 meters, and you'd rather be at 50 meters, because it allows you to aim. However, some tanks don't have a lot of gun depression like the KV-2, which forces you to be a certain distance away. So it can make it more of a challenge. The next thing to note would be that I can't test any of it up against a American tank because of the limitations of the test drive system. And let's see. I'm not sure if the German HE shells are not as good as the Russian HE shells, or even the American HE shells, as the test drive system is flawed in a way that I can't test it up against specific tanks. So I can't fully test it, and I can't test it up against its own tanks. So I can't test a Panzer IV against a Panzer III or Panzer II, just as much as I can't test the KV-2 against the T-26 to see if it does anything different from the Panzer IV's 14mm HE shell. The American M4A1 has 8mm penetration, and it seems to penetrate the bottom side of all of the it seems to penetrate the bottom side of the Panzer II, the Panzer III, and the Panzer IV. I'm not quite sure about the bottom side of the Stug, as of I can't test it out as much as I can the other three. However, shrapnel shells seem to be the best way to do it. However, shrapnel shells are, I think, exclusive to the Russian guns. So you'll only be able to use them on specific occasion. Like I said, the T-28 seems to be the best tank to use. It has some nice shrapnel shell and it's at tier 1, so you won't face anything that you should have any problem penetrating the bottom side of. As on that note, however, anything bigger, like a KV-2, you start getting into the times where you start finding yourself against Tiger 2s and Panthers, which to a KV-2 isn't bad, but to a T-34 is, meaning that you're going to have a lot of problems with them. The T-34 1942 seems to have a nice shrapnel shell, but it faces things bigger than the T-28 does. I believe they have the same shrapnel shell, but the one on the T-34 is better by like a single millimeter of penetration. Other than that, however, it seems like everything has been tested out, other than the things that I've mentioned. Alright, so here's what's been tested. A summary of what's been tested. So far, the Russian tanks have not been tested. I can't test against a Russian tank against a Russian tank. I also can't test an American tank against a Russian tank. The next thing would be that I can only test against the opponents that are put in the test drive map for me. So that's all I can do. I can only test against those, meaning that HE shells with 6 millimeters of penetration will penetrate the bottom side of the Panzer II-C and the Panzer IV-C. Those being the only ones that I can test up against, I can say that 6 millimeters of penetration will penetrate the bottom of them, as of the German or the Russian and the American ammunition, HE ammunition. For the Germans, I'm not sure. I can't test them because of the lack of proper testing setup that I can add. The next thing would be that it seems like the German tanks are the weakest towards this towards this technique. It seems like they get easily killed by this. As you saw, I was going up against the Russians in the last clip, I was going up against the Germans in the last clip, and every time I shot something under them, it did penetrate and it did do damage. It lit the one that was up against the rock on fire, and it lit the AI on fire. I couldn't, however, get a good shot under the Stug, so I can't do much against him. I couldn't get the gun depression to shoot under him to see. So that's what's been tested. The Russian tanks seem to be pretty much impervious to this technique so far. The German tanks seem to be the weakest, and the Americans are still undecided. You can't test them at all. So I can't tell. Also, I have a feeling that the HE ammo on the German side might be weaker than the US and the Russians. Anyway, that will be it. So, I'll see you guys in the next thing. I'll see you guys in the next episode of whatever I make. See ya!